Hey everyone! So last time we looked at physical changes and chemical changes, and we learnt how a chemical reaction is when starting materials change into a different material at the end. So lots and lots of processes are chemical reactions. We're going to now look at a few more ways of describing reactions. So we're going to look at reactants and products, and also how to write word equations for a chemical reaction. So firstly, let's start with an example of a reaction. Here's one that we mentioned in our introduction activity. Remember, there's a chemical reaction that happens in rocket engines, particularly the space shuttle. And in that reaction, we had, there's a fuel tank that has oxygen in it. And then there's another fuel tank that has hydrogen in it. So these are elements. And then during the chemical reaction, these two elements combine together and they make the compound, which is water, H2O. And they release lots and lots of energy, and that's what causes the rocket to be able to take off. But the main point is that we start off with oxygen and hydrogen, and then the final material is water at the end. And so when you're describing a chemical reaction, the starting materials are called the reactants. So they're the starting materials, and water in this reaction is called the product. So products in general are the materials you get at the end of a chemical reaction. So the end materials. So every chemical reaction, it's got reactants and products. Sometimes there might only be one, like in this example, but often there's more than one reactant and product as well. Okay, so here's a picture of oxygen, hydrogen, and water. And the next thing that scientists do is they write out a reaction in an equation. So the first type of equation that we learn is a word equation. Word equation. And this is really just a summary of all the reactants and the products put into almost like a mathematical equation. But it's a little bit different. So we'll use our rocket example again. So here's oxygen. So we write out our two reactants, oxygen plus hydrogen. So if there's more than one reactant or product, we use a plus sign. Unlike a maths equation, we use an arrow when we're doing word equations and chemical equations. So they're the reactants, and the product in this one is water. So we had reactants, and water was the product. So that's all you need to do to draw a word equation. You're just listing the reactants and the products with plus signs in between, and then an arrow between the reactants and the products. That word needs a C. Okay. So let's look at another example. Here is another important reaction. This one happens in nature a lot. So in this reaction, we have sodium. So sodium is a metal. It's a really highly reactive metal. And sodium gets added to chlorine. Chlorine is a gas. So you can see here it's a yellow looking gas. It's really toxic, and sodium metal is toxic as well. But when these two reactants combine, they just make table salt, which is called sodium chloride. So two really toxic elements combine together in this reaction and they make just your average table salt that's fine to eat, and we have it in all our foods. So there's a word equation for this reaction. Again, we've got the reactants, and then we've got one product here, table salt. Okay, one more example. This is to show that not all chemical reactions involve combining. Sometimes it's the reverse. So in this reaction, we have the reactant is called hydrogen peroxide. So we only have one reactant here. Hydrogen peroxide is often used as a cleaning product, but hydrogen peroxide undergoes a chemical reaction where it breaks down into water and oxygen. So we'll write water plus oxygen. So in this chemical reaction, we've only got the one reactant. We've got two products this time. So you don't need to have, not every chemical reaction is all about combining. Alright, so that is the difference between reactants and products and how we draw word equations.